Welcome back, everybody, to our weekly Sermonette. Hope everybody's doing well and enjoying our little better weather. It seems like the extreme heat might have broken. Hopefully it stays this way and it just keeps getting better and better as we actually approach and are getting closer to our high holiday season. Hopefully we'll have very nice weather for that as well. Today, I want to talk about, if you want to say maybe the title will be Feeding Your Animals. I'm not just talking about our physical animals, which is actually a Jewish law that we feed our animals first, as we'll soon mention, but also within each and every one of us. We are a put together, as Jewish mysticism, Chassidus, Tanya explains, that we have a godly soul and we have an animal soul. So we're put together of two types of souls, and they each have a different drive and a different mission. And very basically, a way to describe that is our godly soul is the one that connects to God, to things spiritual, our love, our awe, focusing on our spiritual mission and spiritual connections of things wholly spiritual. Our animal soul, on the other hand, is our drive towards being human. And even our animal soul has its natural tendencies that sometimes need to be refined. Naturally, an animal is selfish. We need to refine ourselves to be a little less selfish and refine our character. That is our animal soul. And obviously, we need to work on both of these tracks all the time. There's a place for each of those. But the question is, which one comes first? Do I first work on refining myself and my animalistic characteristics and refining that and working on that in a better way? Or do I first work on refining my spiritual connection? So actually, in this week's Torah portion, we have a Jewish law which comes from a line in the second paragraph of the Shema, where it tells us that the Nasati Esav B'sadcha Levamtecha V'achalta V'savota. I will give grass and I will give things in the field for your animals. And then it says, and you shall eat and be satiated. And from there we learn a very interesting law, which is that you actually feed your animals first. In Jewish law, one has to feed their animals before they eat themselves. But actually, everything in Judaism is exact. Everything has its body and its soul. And everything that is out there in the body, it's because of its reflection in its soul. And laws also have that. Jewish law has that as well. And we see here all of a sudden that the animal aspect has to come first. And we see that actually in creation. God created the animals before he created human. Even our souls, we receive our animal soul, so to say, when we are born. And we don't receive our spiritual soul, our godly soul, until we reach the age of maturity, bar and bat mitzvah, which is why we become obligated to the mitzvah at that time. As a matter of fact, second paragraph of the Tanya, the spiritual book of the Tanya, which tells us about our souls and gives us instructions about them, and it enlightens us all about them, actually calls the godly soul the Nefesh Hashenis, the second soul. So from here we see that really the main aspect of our lives, is first that we have to focus on taming our animal soul, taming our selfishness, and then we work on our godly issues. But there's one place that we find a seemingly contradiction, also in this week's Torah portion, where in this week's Torah portion, it tells us about the 7 species that the land of Israel were blessed with, and it's not just a random idea, but actually, as we said, everything is very, very specific. Now, from those 7 species, 2 were grains, and they were wheat and barley, and then we have the other 5 fruits. But talking about wheat and barley, without going into great depth, we see there's a difference, and it actually starts off with wheat and then barley. Now, wheat is normally considered food for human consumption, and barley is considered animal fodder. And here, all of a sudden, when it tells us about the 7 species, it tells us about the wheat first and then the barley. So there's a question, why is that so? Everything is supposed to be in Judaism, in Torah, and as we peel away the layers, everything's supposed to be exact. And what lesson can we learn from that? So the Rebbe once discussed a particular Talmudic story. And the Rebbe's father, Reb Levi Yitzchak, who I'm actually named after. My name, Levi Yitzchak, is for the Rebbe's father, whose birthday is this coming Monday, the 20th of Av. Reb Levi Yitzchak was a great rabbi who sacrificed his life for world Jewry in the former Soviet Union. And he was a great mystic and a Kabbalist, and there are many teachings of his that are being revealed and sort of being published and being found today's days, and we study them. And the Rebbe, using his father's classical style of looking at everything through its deeper lens and a lesson for our lives, has a very interesting teaching about this concept of human versus animal, which one is first, and it's based on a Talmudic story. There's a story in the Talmud, and I'm going to share with you the story of the Talmud, first with its regular interpretation, then with its mystical interpretation, its spiritual, if you want to say Hasidic interpretation, and the lessons for our lives. So the discussion is regarding the idea of using proper language, what we call Lashon Nekiya, refined language. And it discusses that a person should always strive to use refined language. Instead of saying something is bad, saying it's not good. There was times where a man came from the Far East once to meet with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe says, you come from a place that is not near. In the Torah, we find many places where it says about an animal that it says that it's not pure, rather than saying it's a defiled animal, teaching us euphemistic expressions of how we have to train ourselves to speak in a refined language. So there's a story in the Talmud where the rabbis were sitting in the study hall, and they sent Rabbi Yochanan, they sent him on a mission to go see, and they asked him to go see about the crops. And this year's crops, and the question was, they asked Rabbi Yochanan to go find out and inform them, chitim nasu yafos, whether the wheat, this year's crop of wheat is nice, if it's doing well. Anyways, he went out into the fields, he came back. When he came back, they asked him that question. And they asked him, chitim nasu yafos, is the wheat crop doing well? Is it nice? And he responded to them, and he told them, sa'orim nasu yafos, the barley did very, very well. He didn't want to say that the wheat crop didn't do well, so he said the barley crop is doing well. So they responded to him, and they told him, why didn't you go tell that to the horses and the donkeys? We asked you, what's this got to do with the price of rice in China? The price of tea in China. I ask you about one thing and you answer me about something else. What's this got to do one thing with the other? And the Talmud goes on to ask the question there and asks, what should he have said? What would have been the proper way to say it? Because he was trying to be euphemistic and give them an answer. And the Talmud concludes, he said he should have said, last year's crop of wheat did very, very well. That's the discussion in the Talmud, and that is the general expression is teaching us how we're supposed to use a refined expression. So now we're going to change hats, and we're going to see how the Rebbe explains this particular Talmudic story and every detail of the story. I'm just going to say it briefly, but the Rebbe goes on to explain every detail, even the name of the sage that went to get it, Rabbi Yochanan. Even in homiletics, things in Torah are exact, and there's something, Torah means lesson, it's there to teach us a lesson. And what he says, that there was really a different conversation that was going on here. The sages sent Rabbi Yochanan to see what is the spiritual status of the population? How are the people doing? And he asked them, chitim, like we said earlier, how's the wheat doing? How are people doing with their spiritual journey? How are they doing on their spiritual aspirations? When he came back, he told them, Sa'orim Nasiyafas, the barley is doing amazing, which means that the people are really working on refining their animal souls. They're working diligently, and they're doing very, very well on refining themselves and refining their animalistic, selfish side and working on that aspect of their lives. So the sages said, wow, if they are working on refining their animalistic side, perhaps we could even take this a step further. Why don't you go tell this to the horses and the donkeys? You see, even in animals, there are kosher animals, which are things that actually could be elevated and refined, the permissive aspects of life that have to be done better. And then there's the parts that are impure animals. So perhaps we could even get to the dysfunctional parts of society that they should get better as well, that people could work on their dysfunctional things that are totally prohibited, and perhaps even there we can actually elevate the people and bring them to a better level. So what is the rest of the conversation? My Havalei Lamemer, what should he have really said to them? So the answer is, he should have said last year's crop of wheat did very, very well. And here is where the crux of that lesson is, and going back to what we spoke about earlier. Yes, it's true, we have to work on our animal side. But a person can't lift themselves out of, lift themselves up and work on their selfish animalistic side unless there's a greater power, and that is their spiritual soul, their godly soul. So he's telling them that to be able to do so, you need last year's crop. The reason why they're able to work on their animal souls and the person is able to refine themselves is because last year's wheat did very well, which means that they've first worked a little bit on their godly soul and they had a good foundation of their connection to God. That helps that they were able to refine and work on their animal side, which means their selfishness, their day-to-day activities, those trials and tribulations and struggles that a person has in their daily life, to be able to lift them up and become a better person. It's because last year's wheat crop did very, very well. We first connected, which is here. This is what I would like to conclude with. And this is the idea that we have these two souls. And what we have to do, we have to realize that our main emphasis in life, true, is to work on our animal side. Our main emphasis in life is to refine our selfness, to refine our character. But we have to be able to do so, we first have to have a spiritual connection. And therefore, there's no contradiction between what we said earlier. Yes, usually the emphasis is on feeding our animal first. The emphasis is that the main focus of our life. And we find that it's interesting that we're told 6 days shall you labor, and on the seventh day you rest. Most of our life is focused on involvement with materialistic, involvement with our animal side. And even in our day-to-day life, yes, we need to start our morning with a foundation. We wake up in the morning, we connect to God with our Moda Ani, thanking God for giving us back our soul, realizing that that's the foundation, and it's with that power that I could actually change the rest of my day, to change the rest of my life. I might, we say our morning prayers in the morning, but then we spend most of the day in our day-to-day matters, which are also godly. We recognize that they're actually, even the animal soul is a soul. The whole purpose of our being. Some people get so carried away with only the materialism, and sometimes if we don't have the strong foundation of basing it on our connection to God, sometimes we could run astray. So we have to realize, yes, the main emphasis that we have to feed our animals, feed the animal within ourselves, and work on our character and our selfishness and whatever else there is that we need to refine that character. But the way to do that is by first connecting to God, having a strong connection to God, and knowing that we have a mission in this world, and part of that mission is, and the main part of that mission is to work on our human side. God didn't want us to be angels. He wants us to be true humans. But we have to know that the reason we're doing that is because God wanted us to do it. And that comes from last year's crop. First, creating the foundation and connection to God. And then we can actually refine everything else as well. So let us hope that, as we go through this continuing, if I would call it, various different, our pandemic, our plagues that are plaguing us now, the whole purpose of the plagues was to get a wake-up call. It was a wake-up call that the Pharaoh should realize that God is God, that we are here for a mission. So I think it's time that we tell God we've gotten the wake-up call. We're reconnecting. It's a great time, as we start now focusing, as getting closer soon to the holidays, a time of focusing on our reconnection to God. And let us hope that we can recognize that we've got the message. We've got the purpose of the plagues was a precursor for the Exodus. Let us hope that we can each do our part, reconnect to God in a very meaningful and purposeful way. And this way we could also refine our animal soul as well, and our animalistic side. And let us hope that our mission of refinement should be complete, and we should merit very quickly to be able to have an exodus from this situation, which should be, with the coming of Mashiach, may be quickly and speedily in our days. Amen. Shabbat Shalom, and look forward to seeing y'all very, very soon.